The IRS issued letters recognizing Scientology, and every one of its organizations has fully tax-exempt the
The length of time from the planet Coltis to the planet Tigiak, which is the name of this planet, was 9 weeks.
27 years in the Sea Organization.
And they had elected a fellow by the name of Xemu, could be spelled Xemu, to the Supreme Ruler.
Good afternoon or evening or morning to you guys, wherever you are watching from. If you are watching live or on the replay, please write down in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is, because I love to know. Now, today we have got a very, very special guest joining me. As some of you guys know, I am doing a bit of research interviewing at the moment to try and learn a bit more about what the life inside the Sea Organization, Scientology's Sea Organization, is really like, so that we can put something together to really visually show that. And today I am joined by a fabulous, fabulous guest. Please give yourself a big round of applause. Please give yourself one. Everybody, please give a round of applause to the fabulous Dylan. Hello. Woo!
I'm giving myself a round of applause.
You should. I hope everyone is cheering right now, because you are an absolute legend, sir. Thank you for joining me today.
Appreciate that. That's all right. I'll take your word for it. Sounds good.
He's like, shh. He's so chill. He's like, oh, whatever. I'm not cool. I'm cool. So today I thought we could have a little bit of a chat about, the RPF, the Sea Organization. Let's bring it back to basics first, though. I think. Could you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us who you are.
Yeah, that's always a hard one for me. I'm Dylan. That was the name given to me by my family, and I've gone by that ever since then. I have been involved with Scientology for pretty much my entire life. My grandfather was in and out. They were artists. My uncle, aunt, father are all in, and it's just been kind of a constant, throughout all of my existence, being in the missions, running around doing TRs with other little people and other whatever, and going to indoctrination interviews, or just disseminating, selling dynamics, door to door, as a kid, and then it ultimately getting sent to the Sea Org and ending up in Florida. Yeah. So
and how old are you when you joined the Sea Organization?
When I first joined, I was 11, 12. I signed my first Sea Org contract, but I didn't actually activate it until I was 14.
Wow.
And
so for anyone that thinks they don't ask minors to join the Sea Org, they absolutely do. And what did that mean to you at the time? Like, you're being recruited for this Sea Organization, your family's in Scientology, it's a big deal. What are you thinking about when you're signing this thing?
Well, it was it's interesting because when I listened to your interview with Natalie, she seemed to know this. She's like, I joined the estate Sorg so I wouldn't get in trouble, and I really didn't have a big idea of like what the ins and outs of the Sea Org were. I just knew that it was a place where, like, this is the ultimate. Like, you are pretty much doing everything you can to ensure the safety of mankind forever, because they'll have the correct technology, and the Sea Org was applying the correct technology. So with that, we will win the war, and but also I was on doing courses at the local mission and the San Francisco org, and I was sneaking off every once in a while and hanging out with my friends, skateboarding, and being kind of an ethics bait or ethics particle. And so my father decided that the best thing would be for me to join the Sea Org. And it was right at that time where it's like you're developing to a point where I wanted 2 years earlier, and then when I turned 14, I was kind of like, well, I don't know. I like hanging out with my friends, and it's kind of fun, like doing those things, and and
Being a kid, you know.
right, right. And so that was kind of thwarted of like, you need to get your responsibility in, you need to, really look at the estimation of effort of what it's going to take to um, clear the planet. And, those were obviously perpetrated by recruiters who would go around to all the orgs and missions. And so when it was finally time for me to join the Sea Org, I was reluctant, and they had to do what's called an RPEC, which
What's
is
that?
a repair of past ethics conditions.
Dear
So it's
Lord.
basically like present time ethics, but like from the past. Like, okay, so a year ago, you went and hung out with your friends and you skipped class, and you should have been doing your upper indoctrination TRs, but you didn't. So you write up all your formulas and they approve it. And that's like the end of the cycle, done. So we handled me that way. And then what's interesting, and it'd be interesting to hear from other people and how this is developed, is when I signed the Sierra contract, my dad had to, because I was a minor, so he had to sign over like parental guidance to somebody he had never met in Florida, to the
Wow.
org I was recruited from. And but honestly,
And
I
where were
know
you based? You went to Florida, but where were you based before then?
I was in San Francisco.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
Yeah,
a
it was my
big
first
move for a
yeah, it
minor.
was a big deal. I was terrified of
Yeah.
flying across country. And it was a one-way ticket. So it wasn't like there was a chance to come back if I failed. This was it, like sink or swim. So um when I showed up to Florida, it was just accept everything coming my way. I didn't really have any expectations as to like what I thought it was going to happen or what I thought life was going to be like. I just had to kind of assimilate into it. And so,
And what
yeah.
was it like?
Um, I remember when I got to Tampa, the first thing was the smell of like matches, or it was like sulfur. It was that weird Florida swampy smell. I'll never forget it because it like totally reminds me of Flag. Um, and it was like the middle of the night, and I got sent to the Fort Harrison, and we got put up in a room. Basically, it was just in the process of getting renovated, and the hacienda was just getting purchased and getting ready kind of to move into. um so I was stuck in a room with a guy who was like 50 maybe years old plus, looked like an old sailor guy, kind of like probably what I look like now. um but I was
You're
14.
14.
So it was kind of a weird experience. And
Wow.
I went to bed and woke up, and then everything kind of started. It's like almost like any job. Like when you get there your first day, people are smiling, everything's kind of nice. They're like, "Oh, hey, I'm glad like all these, they build you up a bit. Um and then you get routed on course, you kind of get the gist of like, here you're, an expediter, or you're basically like, we're going to fit you into where what skill set you have. So at the time, a lot of the EPF were cleaning the sandcastle as housekeepers. And so we were doing housekeeping and doing our intro courses, which is like etiquette, a bunch of basic courses. And then at that time, you needed to get through the staff statuses in order to graduate. I found out later that I guess the staff statuses could be done after you graduate or
What's the
something
staff
like that.
statuses for those that might not know?
It's just basically a series of courses that teach you about the Sea Org and what's expected. And like, the etiquette course is one. You learn how to clean. You learn how to, basically get a product like that. A lot of stuff that if you had been in Scientology was pretty familiar. Cycles of action and completing, and in the Sea Org you can't use any tool or anything without being checked out on its manual. So if you have like a little weed eater, you have to like get the manual and get it star rate, go through it and say, oh, I'm ready. And then they'll check you out. Okay, what up? How do you restring the motor? How do you, it's like, oh. And so you kind of get indoctrinated in that way. And at the time you don't know of like all the peripheral things that are happening. Like sometimes people have been in the EPF for a long time and we're going to get like fitness boarded out because they couldn't complete your basic staff courses. And it basically teaches you how to be a staff member. There's stuff about not having human emotions and reactions and always having the ability to make it go right and just be a producing person, so
What
then
what an absolute mind F for a 14-year-old to be told that like you can't have your emotions, you need to be this producing labor workforce. Were there other kids there when you were there? Were there other minors there?
they still had a cadet org. So
Wow. Okay.
there were quite a few kids in the cadet org that had parents on staff that were trying to go through like you'd graduate from the cadet org and then you had to do your EPF basically. And so if you couldn't pass all the courses on the EPF, you were sent back to the cadet org. And there were a lot of people in that limbo cycle of you can't really offload them because they're not, adults. Their parents are there, but they can't complete and become a productive staff member. So, and then those are things you don't notice when you're in the EPF. You're just in the EPF with a bunch of people. Your coursework is pretty much a personal thing. But the MEST work or the actual physical labor is a group thing, and they put people in different areas. And one of the things I realized later is I was in it with a lot of people that were from, other countries. And I didn't realize how embarrassing it was to go and clean these hotel rooms. One, the OT7s that were disgusting human beings. They were dirty. It stunk. Like it was gross. And they'd be in session like all hours of the day and be in like their pajamas and slippers and like just like it was really gross. It was really an eye opener of like this is the Mecca. And when I would go and knock on the door, I would fake an accent because I at the time I just felt so embarrassed, right? So I'd like knock on and be like housekeeping or something and I didn't even realize
they wouldn't talk to you, or is that why? Did you not want them?
Well, you knocked because if they didn't have a session thing, you could knock. And if there was nobody there, then you could open up the door and go and clean. And sometimes people would answer and say they were sleeping or whatever. But most of the time they had to have a sign up.
The OT7 stuff, that is where they're essentially auditing out all of their
body thetans, yeah.
And they're doing that all freaking day for hours. Like I don't think people understand how insane that is.
Well, and their sessions are like 15 minutes long, 7 minutes long, 20 minutes. Like they're not hours. They're little teeny ones. And then they either blow out and have all, and they can't go back in session or whatever. But you don't realize this as an EPFer showing up brand new to the base as a teen. You just see all these disgusting human beings in the sandcastle, like being weird hermits, and it's it's supposed to be normalized. So it was quite one thing I did notice in the Sea Org is there was a pretty large disdain for the public, that they weren't doing enough. Like they were just using the system basically.
They were just gaining the technology for themselves.
Right. Which is the whole religion, that's the whole, it's a self-serving religion. So it kind of makes, or philosophy or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so the Sea Org or the EPF was that, when you finish the EPF, you go to your org. And then you go to the Hubbard Communications Office, which is the personnel division, and then you're posted as what's called an expediter, and that's usually when they determine what's needed, what the allocation is, who's next to have people. Like in flag, there's 3 basic orgs when I was there. There was 4, but that the middle management org had moved to Los Angeles by that time. So you're kind of posted per how you were recruited. Now, during this time, you're also just a statistic. And so as you're going through the EPF, your quals, which like your qualifications are kind of checked when you do your life history. You do an IQ test, an aptitude test, and then you
Imagine doing
continue.
life history as a 14-year-old. Like, I find that so insane that they make you guys do that, especially when you've grown up in it. Like, they already know
Right.
everything there is to know about you, don't they?
Yeah, no, for it's and then you do it. Like I remember I did my life history, and the ethics officer called me and was like, "Hey, I have a question on, one of these. I think you might have messed up." And I was like, "Oh, like what happened?" And she's like, "There's a question on the life history that says, 'Do you have an open mind?'" And I was like, "Yes, of course." Duh. Well, no, you're not supposed to have an open mind, and they clear you on that, and
No
you're
way.
yeah, you're not, so you're supposed to err to source and error to policy. So you don't have an open mind, because there's only one true technology and one true policy, and that's LRH policy and tech. So they correct you on that, and then after you do your life history, you get what's called a life history check,
Yeah.
and they go through on the meter and they check all your questions and answers. You also have to handwrite everything, all your answers, and those are what basically now constitutes your personnel file. And in Scientology, as an information gathering, high control religious organization, they're all about information gathering. You have personnel folders, you have ethics folders, you have pre-clear folders, and everything that's done within those genres are stuck in your folders. And every time like the case supervisor calls, like for an action, they can ask for all your folders, and then they
Yeah,
go
and
through
these
them. And
questions are personal, right? They are very in depth to I just think of like a young teenager. These questions might be quite invasive potentially. I don't know. What
yeah,
would
the
you say?
life history is pretty invasive. Honestly, I think the most, and that invasiveness gets normalized because, when you get meter checks or you do an auditing action prior to that, you have to be sessionable, or you have to be ready to go into a session. And so they do something called your rudiments, and they ask you for like present time problems. They ask you if anything's been missed. They ask you, if I have an overt. They ask you if you, and so those are things for a teen that are hard. That's actually how I met my wife in the Sea Org, was handling some ethics things about, yeah. So it's really, it's a hard thing. You're constantly monitored. So anytime you're asked to go into and have a meter check, which can be asked at almost at any time. If you have bad indicators, you can get a meter check. And then
Yeah,
they find out
what's a bad indicator?
what's that.
What's a bad indicator? What would indicate bad
Well,
vibes?
a bad indicator would be if you're downtone, right? If you are constantly unsessionable, if you're not producing well. I mean, like there's pretty much anything that you, as a Sea Org member, and even as a Scientologist, you're expected to be mildly interested or above at all times. You're really not supposed to have grief. You're not supposed to, like, there's no negative emotions really allowed. If you do, then that's a bad indicator. You could be PTS, or you could be, like have somebody on your lines that's influencing you, or anything like that. So I think that's kind of part of the daily, like how they kind of control you without really controlling you. Like,
Yes.
it's always over your head. You could always be called out for that almost at any time.
Yeah, and it's this no case on post is a thing I hear all the time as well. Like whatever's going on in your personal life, could be, family, whatever, you can't show any sort of signs of that while you're working,
Right.
because Why? I don't know. Maybe
Well,
you know.
it's like developed traffic. It's other fish to fry. It's, you have other intentions, and the intention is clearing the planet. And they make it so that every job that's being done is paramount to that. So it's not like you're just have a normal work. You're supposed to be productive all the time. Your chat is supposed to be that's why a lot of people, and I forget who touched on this. I think it might have been Natalie or somebody. But you identify as your post. You don't say, "Oh, I'm Dylan, the COPE officer." You are the COPE officer for this, and that's how you identify yourself. So you basically put yourself in that role all the time. I realized a lot when I was in the Sea Org that what the true product of Scientology and the true real thing of what an OT is, if there really is a Sea Org member. Because they just overcome no matter what. They do. It's the most unusual solutions of getting products. Like in the Sea Org, if failure is not an option, you don't fail, or you have consequences that are too gruesome to confront. So it's, and when you do fail, you honestly want to do everything you can not to. So you call, like, I remember when I was later in the Sea Org, I was up at the Church of Spiritual Technology, and we had, all these production quotas that we had to meet. And those would change all the time based on who was viewing the weekly reports and what reports were coming back. And it wasn't like, oh, that's a great idea. It was like, you implement that and make it happen. If that means hiring another crew to come in at 5:00 and work till 11 at night, then that's what you do. Whether you're setting yourself up to fail or not, like, that's technically a financial irregularity and something that you could be RPF'd for. But you do it because you have to do it. You make it go right. There's no fail. It's just, you just don't fail. And if you do, you get punished.
This is what's different, isn't it, about sort of regular workforces and then a cult indoctrinated clergy, or whatever we're going to call it. The Sea Org are the most dedicated to the cause of Scientology because they are completely and utterly devoted to it. Correct? Right. So those things that you mentioned, you can't fail, like if something goes wrong, it's your fault, all of these things, it just wouldn't happen in a regular kind of work environment. And I don't know how it gets there to be so extreme. I don't know if it's little by little or what. You mentioned doing TRs, which are the training routines, earlier. Is the indoctrination the same as the Bridge to Total Freedom, or is it something different that you would do in the Sea organization?
I think it's like when you're a public, or you're in like the mission or org lines, it's more of, and what I grew up with was Scientology in the 70s and 80s, where people were a lot more loose about it. There were kids around. And it was more of a community. That didn't mean the Sea Org wasn't trugging right along at the time. I just hadn't been a part of that. The Sea Org itself is very compartmentalized on purpose. And I think it's so one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and then somebody's kind of the puppet master. And I experienced that personally because of where I ended up in the Sea Org.
And that's the Church Spiritual Technology, which is one of the most secretive locations, or it's up
well,
there,
and that
hey?
was even probably like a vacation by the time I got there. Like, because before that, I was in the Commodore's Messenger organization, and which is basically, per Scientology, that is the observation and execution arm for Watchdog Committee and CMO International, which is the same thing. Watchdog Committee and CMO International, there's no difference. It's just names. Like, for example, when Mike Rinder talks about being CO OSA Int, and then he got promoted to WDC OSA, that post is in CMO Int or bureau for, because CMO has different, instead of divisions, they have bureaus. In the observation bureau, of course, right? Yeah. And all they're tasked for is taking care of their sector. So there's like a watchdog committee for flag service org. There's a watchdog committee, but it's the same post. They're all in division 4 of, or bureau 4 of CMO in. And their post is like Mike's post would have been WDC programs ops CMO in. And so his whole job is to forward any orders that come down and to do evaluations and to do all these like observation missions into his area to continue to have it thrive and produce its product. So
Right.
there is management in Scientology. It's called the Flag Command Bureau, and it's called the CLO, or the Continental Liaison Office. And they're primarily responsible for the delivery of services in Scientology, right? So all the stat evolution, I mean, everybody has the stat evolution on Thursdays, but it's different. Like originally in the 70s, the product of an organization was called the VSD, or the value of services delivered. When I got to the Sea Org in the 80s at Flag, it was GI, gross income. How much did Flag, the VSD was absolutely not, even though it's LRH policy, but there's also policy on gross income. So that's another thing I was talking to somebody about the other day, about how you navigate the Sea Org as a good Sea Org member is enough policy, and the counter policy, and when to use them. Like when you're writing CSWs, you don't basically shoot yourself in the foot and say, like there's a thing about auditors can't be recruited on missions. But there's also a policy that says if there's a problem in your area, you can recruit people from that area to handle the same area. So if you know the right policy to use, you can kind of navigate your way, but also that there's a bullet with your name on it, because there's policy that says not to do that. So it's kind of,
Natalie spoke about that. She said that she figured out how to use the policies to kind of get what she needed to get done when it came to getting her kid out of there. But a lot of it is quite contradictory, like you said, right? And
they even have an echelon for that. It's called ethics, tech, and admin. So HCOBs, or Hubbard Communication Office Bulletins, are senior to HCOPL, Hubbard Communication Office Policy Letters. And so if you use an HCOPL to override an HCOB, you're in trouble, because you should know better. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of know the pecking order of the tech as well, because there's also orders of the day, flag orders, ship orders, executive directives, research and discovery, series. So there's all this information. And if you're smart, you can siphon through it and get your product, because it's all based on policy. So it's kind of I think it's more of a survival mechanism than an actual skill or attribute that anybody would want to actually claim as theirs, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Like it sounds like just the amount of information you guys have to deal with. Like I can't even cope when I get too many emails,
Right.
But like you said, you've got all these orders coming from everywhere. How the heck do you get through that? And I wanted to ask you about what your day-to-day was kind of like,
So I'll tell you, every day you write a battle plan.
Okay.
Right? Every day. And you go over your battle plan from yesterday. And you take anything that isn't done and you put it on your battle plan for today. And you seriously write. I used to write battle plan and write my things you write your battle plan every day. And you also have an inbox, an outbox, and a pending box at your desk or where you work. And your inbox, and you also have a email or Mercury account at the same time. And when your email shows up, you have what's called a time machine. Thank you, Shelley Miscavige. to get that order done. So if you get an order from your senior, it'll say, hey, I need you to go and check out these people or blah, blah, blah. And I need you to report back in 15 hours. You have to report back or you're assigned a condition of emergency or possibly danger if they bypass you. So you have to, and there's also in the way the Sea Org works is the Division 1 or the Hubbard Communications Office Division is basically, I don't want to use super derogatory language, but they're like the hall monitors, I'll say, of the Sea Org. And because that's where all your ethics officers are, that's where all your personnel people, and that's where your communications department is. And your director of communication goes around and checks your inbox, checks your outbox, and checks your pending box, right? And there's certain policies that apply to that. So you have to keep those things moving. You can also be spot checked on your battle plans. You can also be spot checked on, what cycles of action you have going on that aren't getting finished. So these people go around and they're able to kind of find little outpoints. And luckily, I was in HCO. So I know this because I was a division head in there. And that's kind of what we were tasked with doing was also musters are a big thing. You muster, you get up in the morning if you have secured at night. It varies. Usually you have had to eat by, God, I remember morning muster, I think it was like 9:00 because half the time it depends where you are. Like I would envy people in the flag service org that were like tech pages or folder admins because they would have a set schedule. They would secure on time. They would maybe have to write a few letters every once in a while. But when you're in these other orgs, you're basically getting direct orders from INT and David Miscavige and LRH or whoever constantly. And you basically get to a point where you don't secure. You don't go home at night. You sleep under your desk. I'd be recruiting for missions like at all hours of the night, 2, 3 in the morning. I'd be waking up the captain FSO to get him to sign a CSW that I was taking one of his division heads for a mission. And then we would start briefing them at like 2, 3 in the morning so that we could get them fired out and get that product that was needed. So the schedule, if you do eat breakfast, you have a muster directly after breakfast. So 9-ish. And then you go on post, and then you have lunch, and then you have a muster directly after lunch.
So they're checking where you are at all times, right? So you can't make a quick getaway after a meal.
Well, and at the time you don't think that way. I mean, I guess if you're trying to escape, you do. And that would probably be the time is act like you're going to lunch and then just bail. Yeah. And then after lunch, usually you either had like study time. You're supposed to, in the Sea Org, you're supposed to get 12.5 hours of study a week. But you only usually do that when there's a mission that's putting in those standard things. Whereas you would rather take that time to get products on your post and not be downstat and thus be in conditions. In the CMO, we were on a card system, and we basically had cards for social card. We had a meal card. We had a birthing card. And if you had any of those taken away, you couldn't secure, you couldn't eat other than rice and beans, and you couldn't do any social events. And so they were kind of
that card away.
Your senior or the CO of the org. I mean, I think only the CMO and like other management orgs did that. And those were things also when I was in the Sea Org, there was a thing called the DPF, the DEX Project Force, where you were put in lower conditions and made to do messed work for your org and taken off post basically. And then once you got through your program, you were put back on.
It's very concerning to me to hear that you've got these sort of basic necessities in a card form, that could be taken away from you. Like these are your basic human freaking needs, like to sleep, to eat, to have social time, any of that stuff. And the fact that that is under somebody's control is so crazy to me. It's insane. Did you ever have any of those cards taken from you?
Oh, absolutely. I even got in trouble one time. I went to a social thing and I didn't have my social card, and I got called out in the middle of the dinner and made to go home. So it was pretty embarrassing. But and a lot of times it's like sending. So to take a leave, you get a day off every other week if your stats are up, right? So after you finish Clean Ship Project, which is every Sunday you do a white glove of where you live. And then also we would do white gloves of our org on, I believe it was like Saturdays. But you would write a CSW, like a completed staff work, which is kind of what you want, how it's going to happen, who's going to hold your post, how long you're going to be gone, like all these things to have a day off. And 9 times out of 10, you would submit that to your senior, and then you wouldn't really hear anything, and it's getting closer, and then you wouldn't really hear anything, and you're like, hey, did you get that CSW that we're all going to the movies? And then you'd wait, and then it would get approved, and then you would start to go, or you'd be on your way, and then you get called back because there was a flap, and it was there were times where you definitely got to have a day off, but it became less and less. As at the time, it was really important for the Flag Service Org to have $1 million a week in gross income. And so as the CMO, we were responsible for debugging any stops to that. So we would do missions into the reg offices, the registrars, and we would do everything and then it would be Thursday, we'd succeed, and then next week and another $1 million. And eventually I guess they got it up to 2 million, but I was gone by that time. So yeah, it was, at the time it was very normalized. Like we joked, we laughed, we were a bunch of kids in the CMO. I mean, the oldest person was a guy named Richard Franklin. And I think he was like 24, 25 maybe. And so it was weird to normalize something like that. And to, I still think of, it's not like I sit here and reminisce and be like, it's so amazing. But I think of some fun times that I had in the Sea Org, because it was like, one, sleep deprivation, so you're pretty much delirious. And I do remember going to that, like the Flag Service Org, because we used to be able to walk back and forth. And where the CMO was about 2
Not
blocks.
anymore.
Right. And we would have places where you could go and kind of like hide for a half an hour and fall asleep, and then wake up and kind of go back, because you're just so exhausted. Like you just don't, you can't operate, and that's not an option. So you find those ways to do that.
Do you think they keep you guys so busy, sleep deprived, so you don't start thinking, this is not really it, like, why do you think it's like that? Or do you think it's about production completely?
Honestly, yeah, I don't think it's that. If it was that malicious, it would be almost understandable, and then the right to react would be so much more prevalent. But it's true believers basically running true believers. It's like, and this has been talked about ad nauseum, and we forget about it. It is a cult of the mind. It is, you're in till you're out. And that's like, even the whole Shelley narrative has been like that, where, oh my God, everybody, you look at it in normal society and you go, right, husband and wife, they shouldn't be apart that long. They would want to, this is the Sea Org. This is somebody like Shelley loves LRH and the Sea Org way more than she would ever love David Miscavige. And there's no doubt there was love there. But what's that?
I said, I can believe that.
And even David Miscavige loves the Sea Org, and maybe himself. But he believes, how as twisted and as disgusting as it is, that he is doing the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. And he is, the war is over, like in the beginning of your video. And they do look at it as a war. That's the other thing. This isn't a game. This isn't, oh, a cute little, and that's, this is talked about in a lot of, and how you're recruited to the Sea Org is this is it. This is man's final stand. It's like this whole big hoo-ha, it's almost like a PR for a film premiere. It's like, oh my God, the greatest thing forever. You have to see it. And people buy into it,
Yeah.
and it's
I love everyone's Scientology voice. Everyone has one. And
right.
it's like the event voice where they're like, this year we've
Yeah,
got
exactly.
this many orgs opening all over the world. Everyone has one. And I love hearing people do it.
Right. Well, when we were later on, yeah, and this is where like the echelon thing comes in. It's like, so I was in the CMO and that seemed like a high management group and all this stuff. And then I got recruited to go up to a higher org. And in the Sea Org, it's not like, oh, you're going to CST or you're going to INT or it was always a big like hush hush thing, and you do you have all these qualifications that you now have to go redo. You have to do new IQ, new personal aptitude, you have to get sec checks. You have to have all your folders have to be gone through. Anything that you had that was a problem, like any ethics or knowledge reports, get looked at as a pattern, and then they tailor make sec checks based on that, and they check you out.
Of course.
So even if you're sitting there working 120 hours a week, doing everything you can to support the cause, you're now re-scrutinized again. You're now completely looked at as like, well, maybe you do have psych connections. I'm like, I've been in the Sea Org. What are you talking about? Like, I'm terrified of psychs. Like, I'm still scared of reporters. Like, what are you talking about? So it was a weird, but then it also adds to the prestige and mystery of it all, where you're like, oh my God, this is like a better or a bigger calling or a bigger game that now I can play and win and, help forward command intention. So I think that part of it is that they're not malicious and knowing, being like, we're setting these people up. Although all the evidence for that is in the Sea Org, black PR, all these safe pointing, shore stories, you're doing all these things, and it's justified by saying, hey, once they figure out that we're breaking the rules and we're cheating the system, we're going to be the ones running the system. And of course we have the technology that saves mankind. So enough said, so it's like, wait a minute, but you're lying and cheating, but it's justified because they're not informed. They haven't been enlightened to this. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of high demand religious organizations is they set that as a us versus them kind of thing. And, that love bombing, it's a lot of the nomenclature that people are coming up with about the antisocial personality are really prevalent in the Sea Org and Scientology, so that plays a huge part in it, I think.
You referred to it a few times just now as well as a high control religious organization. Do you believe it is religious?
So when I learned about Scientology, I learned about Dianetics first, and from a little kid, from pretty much as far back as I can think of Scientology, it was a science or philosophy of the mind, right? And it was knowing how to know. And that's how it's kind of was preached to the public and the masses at the time, was more of a philosophy of the mind. Now, whether that was because they had problems getting religious status, I don't know. But so for me, I've always thought of it more as a philosophy than a religion. And even when you're in the fold, the whole idea is, I guess one of the concepts is those are just like WOG considerations, right? Yeah. Those are unenlightened considerations. And because they're unenlightened and uninformed. And if they weren't, then they would be totally with us. So that's how they kind of so the religion idea was that, hey, we need to become a religion because that's what the uninformed make it accept. And so by the time they figure out all this crap, they'll of course have the technology and be enlightened and be like, oh my God, why wouldn't we have always?
See.
So it's kind of that little,
And nothing to do with the tax exemption at all.
well, and you know, those are very conveniently concealed parts of it, right? The rank and file, and especially the Sea Org, aren't told about that stuff.
Mm.
You know, like that's not something that it gets disseminated. Like to them, I guarantee you at muster that this morning, they were told that Dianetics is still the bestseller in New York. You know, it's like,
Wow.
yeah, like 187 weeks and counting or whatever, 1,000 weeks and counting. It's like, wait a sec, really? But that's how out of the loop you are, is that of course we're winning. And the only people that aren't winning is this group right here, because everybody else is affluent. Every other org is full except for your org, so work harder at your org and get it full. And then it's direct back to source, and that's kind of the whole. So is it a religion? Gosh, they seem to think so. The US, I guess, thinks so, but England doesn't, right?
No.
Germany doesn't. Australia's kind of on the fence. So, and Russia doesn't. Like, there's a lot of people
the books are actually banned in Russia,
Right, exactly. Because it's propaganda. It's kind of put out that way. And, when LRH started all this, it was during that New Age revolution. And whether that was, imparted partly by the government, or they caught on later and were like, yeah, keep doing this to soften up the sheeple so that we can implant them with our real, whatever we want to do subliminally. But yeah, I don't know that it's, there's too much when you get out of it and look back that it really can't be contrived as a religion, other than by the pure definition of a faith-based group or like-minded people.
The faith is in L. Ron Hubbard, isn't it? That's where the faith lies, isn't it? It's in there and in the words he wrote down. And I guess that whole, what we are, and if we're Thetans and all this stuff.
It's like that thing of like, oh,
faith.
I have this thing. If you had it, then you would know all the. So cool.
What do you have in your hands? I need to know.
Right. Exactly. And if you get in, you can know, right? But you can't until then. And that's part of how they get you in.
Where do I sign up?
It's that mystery sandwich, right? It's that, we have all the answers and we have this and look at this and, and then you get in and you realize that they're safe pointing those people. They're doing this, they're using what other organization has up until 92 an enemies list? They published and had an enemies list of anybody that when it went so far as so they talk about OSA. Everybody's this big, huge OSA, right? So OSA used to be the Guardian's office, and the primary purpose for the Guardian's office was to gather information against people that might be a problem in the future. And it was all external facing. And then at one point, a lot of when Pat Price and Ingo Swann and a lot of these people were getting attention from the government, people started infiltrating Scientology. And they started trying to find out what these little secret things were that nobody knows because we keep them secret. And then OSA, or the Guardian's office, started internally facing. And they started looking for spies and trying to find people that are coming into, and they started an enemies list and would publish it. I remember as a kid, Est was on it, the Process Church, all these individuals. I'm on it. If you look at the one from 92, they couldn't wait to add people to it. And then when they got found out, they stopped doing it. And when it became bad PR, they stopped, just like the whole disconnection thing. This is done. We don't do this anymore because it's bad PR. So it's
they definitely have a list, right? Because I was in Florida not too long ago, right? And Aaron took me on this little tour of downtown Clearwater, where they've got all of their front group buildings.
Right.
The Clearwater Bank building It's where OSA's supposedly housed now, right? But it's
Right.
just a welcome center. And we literally walked up to the door, and I kid you not, like 5 people come from the back to shut it, to close us out or
Right.
whatever.
Like
We're
they
like,
saw
how the
you
hell do
coming.
they all know that we're
Right.
not just some tourists or whatever? It's like they're like, oh my gosh, like, are we on a list? Like,
Well, OSA, their primary purpose is to gather data and information and collate that data, right, to safe point the church. So, of course, they're going to have every piece of intel on everybody that they can. And that's the whole, through their legal, their information, all their different divisions. Those are all set up to gather and collate information on people that are perceived enemies. So absolutely. Yeah, that's their primary purpose. Internally in the Sea Org, OSA has almost nothing to do. They don't run, you don't salute, they're a completely different organization. The people that are just like OSA in the Sea Org are HCL for each org. They're the ones that monitor and put in the ethics of the staff. So it's kind of a misnomer. Like OSA's job is and to intimidate and to do that, but they do that through information. When they know your button, they push it. And that's what, if they go through your ethics folders, your personnel folders, your PC folders, they get different information from all of those and they put them together. Oh, look, in his personnel file, he had an aunt. Oh, right. And he talks about having this problem with his aunt. Oh, and then in ethics, he did that. And they can put all this information together. And now they have a little helicopter program. And they can be like, this is how we get to helicopter. And it could even be like people saying really, really like flattering things so that they can set up other people to say negative things. So it's not just this one attack. It's more of a multi-pronged attack. And it's easy for them to do because that's what they're set up to do. It's not like, oh, we have to take all this time. It's pretty much, here's the process, gather all the info, boom, there's your plan. So
I would love to see it. Any OSA people watching, if you have a helicopter program, please send it over. I would love to see it.
The helicopter handling program is being requested, please.
It's being requested. Please submit to hellohelicopter@gmail.com.
That's right.
I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about the differences between, being in the Sea organization and what happens when you get sent to the Rehabilitation Project Force, the RPF. What is it? What does it mean for a Sea Org member? Can you talk me through it?
Well, I can talk you through my experience and some other people, I guess, that I knew. So when you're in the Sea Org and you get sent to the RPF, no other Sea Org member is supposed to have, like, you're basically excommunicado, right? You're not allowed to make eye contact with any Sea Org member in good standing. To them, that's initiating communication. Right. So you're not allowed to originate any communication, even looking.
Who are you allowed to talk to then?
You're allowed to talk to your other RPFers and the RPF IC. And that's it. And the RPF IC is usually either an RPFer that is almost graduating or an actual staff member that handles but they liaise. I think the RPF IC is usually in the RPF, and then they liaise with somebody in HCL. Mm-hmm. And otherwise it's its own entity. You're supposed to run everywhere. You're supposed to, you do there's a auditing action called the false purpose rundown. And you are basically, you go through that on every dynamic. So that's like all over, it's with from like past lives, everything on every dynamic, basically. So, and then you do what's called a truth rundown at the end. And you usually, a lot of these people aren't trained. Like when you get RPF, you're not trained as an auditor, right? To give auditing. So you are immediately trained to become an auditor by what's called REDD, which is read it, drill it, do it. And they use word clearing as well, where you like, there's a lot of different kinds of word clearing, but it's basically where you read a policy and somebody else skims along with you. And if you stumble on a word, they clear the word. That's also done on an e-meter. And so there's a few different processes. There's like M4, M9. There's a couple other M's, but it's just a method of word clearing.
And
So
you're
that's how
doing
they.
all this whilst doing like really hard labor, right? You're exhausted sharing these like communal living and stuff. It's like
Yeah, communal
how
living would be actually kind of nice, but yeah, it's more of like find a place on the floor for the most part on the
you
RPF.
sleep
You
on the
don't
floor.
most at Int, when I was at Int, we slept in these double wide trailers that were probably about, I don't know, 500 yards from the actual Int Ranch and where the kids Int Ranch and the big building were. Yeah, and it was pretty much you slept on the floor. You slept wherever. I mean, I think maybe a couple people had beds, but yeah, it made because in the Sea Org, you're stacked up like 3 or 4 or 5 high sometimes on bunks, and there's 8 people in a room. So it's like you go to the RPF and you have the same thing. That would be like halfway decent, right? So in the Sea Org or in the RPF, it's kind of like, extra. But yeah, you're not allowed to. You work on projects. You pretty much do anything and everything that's needed. A lot of renos. There's tons of stories of people that have lost their lives, lost their eyes, lost, and those are the accidents. It's just other people that are just doing stuff that just it's beyond ridiculous what people are made to do, and then rehabilitate and do this whole program to prove that you can just become a basic staff member again. And then go back to your normal schedule of like not sleeping and not working. So
Yeah, it's so dehumanizing. It sounds so dehumanizing. These are your very basic sort of needs and stuff, and that's where the control really comes into it for me, because that is taken from you.
right.
When you've obviously been out for a good number of years now,
Right.
do you find that your time in there on the RPF and in the Sea Org, does that have any impact, do you think, in your day-to-day life now, even though you're not in it anymore?
Yeah, 100%.
How?
It does.
In what way?
It's hard to not be hypervigilant. It's hard not to always feel like you're lacking or you're lazy or you're not doing enough. It's hard to socially fit in and accept and, not be completely analytical or completely, it's, I've worked really hard to try to get rid of a lot of the, well, that's what's hard. I think if I got rid of everything I knew in the Sea Org, I would have to get rid of everything. And I don't know that I like, I don't know that I love myself enough. I carry a lot of shame, about, well, leaving, like leaving people there. There's people I know that are still there. And they're still doing that, and they've been doing it for decades. And so that feeling of like I abandon my comrades, and when I left, I got abandoned. So I didn't, it's not like I was able to go. When you blow from the imp base, you are pretty much instantly declared and never allowed back. And so, I didn't know that prior. Not that I don't know that it would have
Well,
changed
that's
anything.
as long as the blow drill doesn't work, right? Which obviously is
Right.
the name of your whole channel.
Yeah, which it didn't, Jackson.
Was he the one who was supposed to get you?
Oh yeah, they all chase me, like PK and Jackson and yeah, their whole little bumbling security crew. No.
Oh my god. So what was your escape like? How did you escape?
I escaped from a place called Happy Valley, and which is on the other side of a reservation about I think it's about 20 minutes or walk or run from Hemet. And so I left from the RPF in the middle of the night. And I ran down a creek. Laura did a video when she did the video about the cadet org, and she was going up there, and she was like, "Here's this river," and here I'm like, I ran down that. That's how I left right there. I ran in the middle of the night with my RPF stuff. And yeah, so I escaped from that, and then ended up in Hemet, and that's when they started driving their motorcycles around trying to find me and all that kind of stuff. So
It's just a big long road though, isn't it? Where the hell did you go?
in Hemet, when I made it to Hemet, I went to a Denny's and I hung out in the lobby there, and then I went to a laundromat that was right by the bus station, and I kind of hung out and hid. I mean, it's like at that point you're pretty much in fight or flight, like, and so I was ready for somebody to come and try to get me, and I knew I didn't want to go back. So I did everything I could to not get caught, basically. That was my plan.
PSA for anybody watching, if you have to escape, it's likely you're in a cult.
Right. Well, and that's the funny
Wow.
thing is, like, so I had spent most of my time in HCO, and when I was I'd finished the RPF, and I was on the RPF, and I knew that if you asked to be put on the LSRF, which is the leaving staff routing form, you pretty much couldn't be denied. But I also knew the purpose of the leaving staff routing form is to keep you in the Sea Org. But if you are able to get through it, you're allowed to leave. But they wouldn't put me on it. So I spent months trying to get put on this stupid routing form to route out. And finally I realized that I was never going to be allowed to leave. And that whole realization of like, now what do I do? I haven't spoken to my wife in like 8 months or 9 months. She's in RTC expediting under Shelley. I'm out at the Int Ranch going into Int every day, being kept away from her and not allowed to, and it's just this, like, this is never going to end. And I didn't even, like, everybody didn't do anything and everybody did everything. So yeah, my RPF issue, or my suppressive person declare, was, pretty much more of the same. Financial irregularities, like all the normal stuff that you do in the course of making it go right, knowing that they could always come back and crucify you. And I think one for one, a lot of people were like that. I don't think there were very many people that were just downright criminals. I think everybody was working their ass off, and somebody's going to have to get nailed, and every once in a while it's your turn. So yeah, leaving was hard. Leaving was there was a long time that I don't know if I would have left if I knew what was in store. I probably would have stayed a lot longer, which is kind of odd, but yeah, it's hard because if you have family and they instantly tell you it's their choice to disconnect from you, and your only terminal is the international justice chief, so you don't have a lot of options. So now everything you knew for 7, 10, whatever years is gone, and everything you knew prior to that, they are choosing, you're suppressive now. You're an evil person. You're counterintention to the only technology that'll save mankind, and your only option is to get back in. So even doing the suppressive, like the A to E steps, your only option is to become a Scientologist again. You can't reconnect with your family. You have to become a Scientologist. You have to accept that the tech is workable again. And then if they want to talk to you, they can. So it becomes this weird, thing where you're kind of, I guess when a lot of people left, they went to like Scientology, like not front groups, but like Scientology owned, public Scientology owned businesses. and were able to kind of work a bit and do that. I had no clue about any of that. I wish I kind of did, but
Yeah,
I didn't
where
have.
did you find support when you left? Because your whole family's there. You know, you're getting disconnected from that way. Where did you find any support on the outside?
This guy. No,
Wow.
I kind of I just relied on myself is what I did, because that's
This is
really
back
all you
before
can
any
do.
charities or anything. So, you know,
Yeah, there
like
wasn't a lot of
nowadays.
help, I don't think, out there. So yeah, I ended up not um very in a good place. I ended up homeless for a long time, um and not couch surfing. I don't even know why I need to clarify that, but um yeah, being like living um places, it's pretty scary, like to try to find safe places to sleep and things that you can eat and stuff. That's that gets hard. And it's, I mean, you can normalize that too. Um but and I normalized it for a good couple years. And then I started kind of hanging out in libraries, and I started realizing that there are resources out there for you. But I think a lot of the times when you grow up in this kind of religion is you're you're painfully ignorant, um, and not in a bad way. It's not like you decide it's that you didn't really know any better. So you um, what you don't know is you don't know. And if there's, you've been shown that people aren't there to help you, and the only salvation is something you ran away from, then that's sort of like when I reached out to my dad. I didn't end up on the streets immediately. It took about a month or so. Um, and I reached out to my dad, my uncle, and when I talked to him, they pretty much said, you're only terminal. There's no option here for you. And I was staying with an aunt that has never been in Scientology, and my father had talked to her and said, hey, he left and he's this, and she came to me. I was like, look, you need to get a job, and I was like terrified because I didn't even have a driver's license. I didn't have an
Yeah.
ID. I didn't have anything. Um, and like a good SEERG member, I was like, okay. And I went and tried to go fill out applications, and I'd sit there and I'd just be like, can't do it. I don't know what to say. I don't have a production record that anybody will believe. I don't have any history of anything. And that's when I stole $100 from her and ran away, is what I ended up doing. And um
You're
she's
terrified, aren't you? Like you're in this whole new situation, and like you said, you carried a lot of shame about leaving and abandoning and all of that stuff. So I don't think anyone here is judging you for that. I can understand why it happened, and I'm sure honestly that people have done much worse.
right. Well, and it's like, I mean, I don't know. And for me, it feels like it is much worse, and honestly, for me, I think the end product of it all is that, I don't know how to say this without it sounding terrible. I I'm I'm okay. I've lived long enough now that I'm okay with being not first. I'm okay with being third or fourth or not even thought of or not even in the conversation. Um and I think that is the ultimate product of, like, if I even think about somebody doing that to my kids, um I don't know. That would be a whole different world. Um but for me, it's okay. If it happened to me, no problem. I can talk about it. I don't even really get emotional. And I think that's part of the numbness of it all.
Yeah.
But when I think about even ex second gens and I think about all this and what has happened is like, I think owning your trauma is a big thing. But I don't know that, you can really ever overcome your trauma. It's part of something that you live with and you accept. And you try to do and navigate the best you can. Before I had kids, it didn't really matter whether I lived or died or I really didn't care.
Yeah.
And then once I had kids, it was like, it was really, I spent the first couple of years going, how could a father or a mother ever do this to their children? And feeling kind of sorry for myself,
Yeah, because your
like,
parents did that to you, for sure.
right. And being like, now I have to be this person that gives them something I have no idea what it is, but I'm going to give it to them no matter what. And I wouldn't ever have it any other way. So it's, is it depressing? Is it lonely? Sure. Of course it is. But, and is putting on a show for your kids? I don't do that. We talk about choosing faith over family. They've seen a few of my interviews. They saw the one I did with Aaron like 5 or 7 years ago. And, those are conversations that are hard because you do want to be vulnerable, but you also want to be that, like they look at you as somebody that they look up to you. And that's hard for me to be looked up to. It's hard for me to be that person. And, it's, so I think part of the Scientology thing is you're always willing to sacrifice. You're always willing to give of yourself willingly. And everything you have and more, even stuff you don't have, you're willing to pour your cup out, give them your cup and be like, no, I'll fill up this way. It's okay. And you, even to be a good father, to be a good parent, I've learned that I have to fill my cup up, and that's hard to do sometimes.
It's
And when I
put your oxygen mask on before putting someone else's on.
right. No, and it's I'm not very good at that, but I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm trying to give myself grace and lead with my own acceptance. And that's honestly, it's a struggle. And that's why this community is important. It's important to me because my family's, they're all in. There's, I have aunts in, uncles in, fathers in, sisters, cousins. Yeah, they're all in. They're not gonna, there's no, the chance of reconnection is not there. So the only people that I can relate to are people that have had a shared experience. And it is
I think
cathartic.
there's no chance of them leaving.
My dad's a teacher at Delphi. He's been teaching there for like 38 years. My uncle and aunt are OTs. They live in Florida. They're pretty in with the Feshback crew and all those people. And yeah, I don't think they've been in for so long. It's like, even if they wanted to get out, they'd stay under the radar. They're not going to come and like reconcile with their nephew or their son. Like, I don't think that's real. And I don't even know how I would handle
so
that, to be honest with you. I don't know.
It's one
That
of
would be a hard
the
one.
most destructive and upsetting things about Scientology is that they really do destroy families, and even turn you guys against each other even when you are in it.
Right.
You're not son and dad anymore, or mother and son, or anything. You
Right.
are just beings inhabiting bodies, and your familial relationships are dissolved. And I just find that so heartbreaking, honestly. And you know what, hearing you talk about your kids and your drive to win for them and be a role model, I love hearing it, Dylan. I really do. I am amazed that the hardship you've gone through in Scientology hasn't hardened you or turned you into like a, I don't know what to say it as, a like a lack of like emotion. You are still feeling, and maybe that's come with time, I don't know, but I'm amazed by it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Well, I think in a world where you can be anything, I mean, you should be kind. And I
Truth.
don't ever want to center myself in someone else's trauma. Like I know that I've survived enough that if I can help someone else survive, um, then I'm all for that. I'm all for giving people their space and trying to meet them where they're at. Because I know that I have healthy boundaries that I can fall back on, and I'm really good at running away. So if I need to, I'm out of here and I'll just disappear. And
Well,
there
I
you
hope
go.
you don't. I hope you stick around.
And I don't mean that. And those are I think that's part of the survival and healing, is that I also don't want to do that. But I guess there's a comfort in knowing that, I've thrown myself off and been thrown off of enough cliffs that, when it's my time, it's my time. And until then, I'm going to try to be here comfortably. I'm going to try to help. And if I can overflow my cup, then I'm going to pour into everybody I can. And, I think that's, do I deal with stuff? Sure. Yeah. Am I probably clinically depressed? Yeah, probably. I don't know. Like when it
Have you
comes
tried
down to it,
therapy or anything?
I spent, um, almost 5 years going to therapy 5 days a week. And,
Wow.
but the first part of that was me teaching somebody about my
The
experience and
trauma,
them
yeah.
being fascinated by it. So it became this weird psychological thing of like, am I telling them what I want to hear so I can have a soft landing? And it became this weird. So I went through a few therapists, and I think therapy is amazing. I don't think that it is the be all end all. I think once you have tools in your toolbox that you can, use, you have to start using those. And the way you use those is in peer situations where you have other people that have experienced similar trauma. And then you can say, hey, see this tool? You might check that out. And here's where I found it. And I'm here to help you if you have a hard time learning how to use that, because I did too. And that's one of those, that's how you kind of that's how you there's I always attribute this quote to DMX, and it's not, he did it somewhere else, but I always attribute it to DMX. And it's, to live is to suffer, and to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. And that's honestly where I feel, is that I'm finding meaning in the suffering, because that's never going to be gone. If there's no miracle for me, there's no miracle cure that's just going to make that all go away. And I don't know if I'd want that, because I think that would take a part of me away. And I don't think I'm special, but I know that I'm me. And
Yeah, and it's what you said earlier, isn't it? About you kind of have to live with your trauma, with your experiences, good or bad or whatever. You have to manage your life with them. And um that can be easy stuff, can't it? Like identifying what kind of sets you off. If somebody I don't know, a work person was demanding X, Y, and Z from you, it might trigger you into feeling like, oh, I'm a bad I'm not producing, I'm a bad person,
right.
I've pulled this in or whatever. Um and and we can identify that stuff and manage it, I think. I agree with you on that it is a part of you, and you are you. Yeah. And
Right.
and you are fabulous, please let
Well,
me
and if we
say.
can turn that into neutral energy and not reactive energy, then it,
Mhm.
it lands a lot different from that person who's maybe struggling in their trauma at the time. The worst thing I feel like I can do is, if somebody else is in this moment where they're triggered, is for me to relate with a trauma moment, or with a trigger, or with reactiveness, or, oh, hey, that's no big deal, you'll get over it. Like, no, they won't. They're in the middle of it. So you act, even with people that are hating and attacking, it's hard not to react with all this vitriol back, or this like, oh, I can react. You want to play. But if you react with neutral energy, it's sort of disarming. And then you can focus on, really, hey, if you are in your moment, I'm here to help you. I'm here to just listen. I'm here to just hold space. You don't even need to talk to me. I'll just be here. And we'll get through it that way. And if you are, when you're ready, when you feel safe, we can talk about it. And I honestly, that's the only thing I want. And that's why I realize that if I run around being mad or upset of why people aren't doing what I want, it's because I'm not doing it myself.
Mhm.
And if I really want that, then that's how I have to be. And that's how I have to try to present myself to other people. So it's a learning thing, I'll probably learn till I die, and then we'll go from there.
Hey, I hope we all learn till we die, for sure. If you're not learning, what are you doing?
Right.
Or
Absolutely.
learning and loving, as Laura
Yeah,
FM tends to
exactly.
say.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Oh, this has been awesome talking to you about this, Dylan. I know it's I mean, your experience with Scientology is awful, and I know you're not alone in that experience either. Thank you for sharing it. I can't imagine it gets easier. But I properly appreciate that. Do you have
I
anything you want
appreciate
to kind
you.
of
Absolutely,
thank
Kelly.
you?
You are bright. I remember our first experience. We chatted a little bit, and then I got reactive, and I got offended about the whole
That's
Serge
right.
Obelinsky thing. And
Yes.
I didn't know how to communicate it, but I was extremely offended. And it was because I felt like I could add, and I imbued myself with a sense of self-righteousness that I thought I could add to that and help that process. And I felt like I was excluded on purpose, and that had nothing to do with you. And
Wow.
so I'm
Yeah.
glad we were able, and I don't even think it was a big rift. It was just kind of a snarky little like, I
Oh
was
no,
like,
you were like, "Wow, Kelly, can't
yeah,
believe you."
wow, that's right. Um, and that's, I guess that's the price you pay for being who you like, being yourself, and us being is we either find out and get to a good place or you don't.
Yeah.
And
And
like,
listen, it's fine. Like, and there's like my experience with you. Yes, we have had little here and there, whatever. We're human, right?
right,
But I remember when we got the news about Doug and stuff, and you were the one who rang me and
yeah,
told me about it. And honestly, Dylan, I think I don't know if I could have heard that from anybody else. I genuinely mean that. Um, and you even explained it just a minute ago that you hold space and you listen and you're there, and you were so there when I was just like yelling on my way to work about it and being
right.
upset about it. And
That was,
you
yeah,
you were you were such a great support in that moment. So I know you mean when you mean it when you say that. You really do that. And yeah, I think you're a really wonderful human being. So you know
thanks. I appreciate that.
may we fall out and make up again in the
Right. Well,
future.
and it wasn't even, I think it was the whole idea of being pressed into keeping secrets from each other.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of ridged against was, I think we should be super transparent. I think we should be, obviously to a point where we're not going to violate healthy boundaries, but
Yeah.
be transparent enough to where, hey, this is where it is. Like even with the Doug thing, like I had spoken to him for like 5 hours 2 days prior. And and when we spoke for 5 hours. My phone would go dead, and it was that because we both went through Scientology. We both ended up homeless. We had these, this was one of those, it's like, wow, there's this person, like, he gets me. I get him. Weird. And I think he had that a lot. He was in that place where he's really trying to push those boundaries and relate and push his own boundaries,
Yeah.
and the world is a little bit darker of a place for having him not here, but he does live
Agree.
on, and he won't be forgotten for sure. um
Yeah. And
and
the work
that's
he has done is still all over the internet for you guys to see. If you don't know for some reason who Doug Scott Kramer was, please go and search him. Oh, have we lost Dylan? Where's he gone? Hey. I think
Yeah.
that's a good place for us to leave it. Dylan, thank you so freaking much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm gonna play our guys out with a little song I wrote with a friend of mine. If you guys are a member of the channel, you will see that pop up. I'm sorry we didn't get to answer questions today, but I hope this conversation has been enlightening for you all. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Please don't hold my hands, 'cause they tell a tale. But you don't see me cry. I'm biting my nails. You promised me a future. You promised me gold. Some stories are fiction, but they still are told. They still are told. So if I walk, stare up at the sky, would all the fear become fearless? A life turn to feeling alive. You said I will walk. You laugh when I try, but I have started believing I can color outside of these lines. I should say thank you. You gave me a lifeline. You would take all these bullets in exchange for my